There is a unique kind of silence that exists in a military blackout zone. For 12 months, I was deployed to an undisclosed, classified facility in the mountains of Eastern Europe. No cell phones, no internet, no letters home. My only connection to the civilian world was a single, heavily encrypted tactical email terminal that I was permitted to access once every 2 months for exactly 5 minutes. Before I boarded that transport plane 5 years ago, I was a young, naive Army lieutenant, and I was deeply in love. Ethan and I had been together for 3 years. He was an ambitious corporate mid-manager in a rising tech firm, polished, charming, and always wearing a perfect smile. 3 weeks before my deployment orders arrived, he dropped to one knee on a rainy bridge in Savannah and slid a diamond ring onto my finger. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Because my deployment was a strict intelligence blackout, we couldn't plan a wedding normally. Ethan suggested a solution. "Give me power of attorney over your civilian accounts, Sarah," he had whispered, kissing my forehead as I packed my duffel bag. "That way, I can sign the contracts for the wedding venue, pay the caterers, and manage the deposits while you're saving the world. Trust me." I trusted him with my life, so I trusted him with my signature. I signed a legally binding power of attorney document, giving him full access to my military savings account, a fund containing $80,000. It was money I had earned through blood, sweat, and 5 years of hazardous duty tours. It was my entire life's security. 12 months later, the deployment ended. I stepped off the military transport plane at Fort Meade, exhausted, thin, but vibrating with excitement. I pulled out my civilian phone for the first time in a year. My hands were shaking as the screen booted up. I expected dozens of missed calls, hundreds of long, loving text messages. Instead, there was only one text from Ethan, sent 3 weeks prior. "Sarah, things have changed. My career is skyrocketing, and I've moved into a new social circle. I need a partner who is actually present, not a government employee locked in a bunker halfway across the world. I've met someone else. Her name is Lydia. Please don't call me. The wedding is canceled." The world stopped spinning. I stood on the tarmac, my duffel bag slipping from my hand. But the nightmare was only beginning. When I logged into my mobile banking app to check my savings, the balance read $14.32. $80,000 had been systematically drained over 12 months. Every single penny had been wired out in increments of $5,000. I ignored his request and called Ethan immediately. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice cold, distant, and completely unbothered. "Where is my money, Ethan?" I asked, my voice trembling, trying to hold back the tears of pure betrayal. He let out a short, arrogant laugh. "Oh, you mean our money? Sarah, look at the law. You gave me full power of attorney. I used that money as a down payment on a luxury penthouse downtown. Legally, the condo is in my name only. Lydia and I just moved in. If you try to sue me, my corporate lawyers will run circles around you. You're just a lowly military officer living on a government salary. You can't afford to fight me. Take the loss and move on." His mother, Eleanor, then took the phone, her voice dripping with venomous condescension. "Listen to my son, Sarah. You were away playing soldier, smelling like dirt and gunpowder. Ethan belongs in high society now. Consider that $80,000 a storage fee for the time he wasted on you. Don't ever contact us again." They hung up. I stood in the cold wind of the military base, staring at a bank balance of $14. I had no house, no fiancé, and no savings. They had used my sacrifice to buy their paradise, and they used the law to lock me out of it. I closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt something inside my chest snap, replaced by a cold, black void. They thought they were safe behind their civilian lawyers and their corporate titles. They didn't realize that the shadow world I operate in doesn't use standard courtrooms. We play a much longer, much deadlier game. For 5 years, I became a ghost to them. I never replied to their messages. I never filed a lawsuit. I didn't confront them at their luxury penthouse. To Ethan and his mother, it appeared as though I had accepted my defeat, crawled back into my military hole, and died. But soldiers don't accept defeat. We reconnoiter. We gather intelligence. We wait for the enemy to expose their flank. I requested a permanent transfer to the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, DCSA. This is the branch of the military that holds absolute power over the corporate world. We are the gatekeepers. We conduct the background investigations, the financial audits, and the psychological evaluations for anyone, civilian or military, who requires a high-level security clearance to work with the United States government. Without a top-secret SCI clearance, no tech company can win a government defense contract. No executive can access federal networks. No multi-billion-dollar corporate merger can go through if the key individuals are deemed a security risk. I spent 5 years climbing the ranks, turning myself into a precision instrument of federal vetting. I became a major. I learned how to read a person's life through their bank statements, their foreign travel, and their secret vices. And meanwhile, I watched Ethan. He was thriving, or so it seemed on LinkedIn. He had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Innovation at Omnitech Solutions. He wore $5,000 suits. His wife, Lydia, posted photos of her diamond bracelets inside their penthouse, my penthouse, on Instagram. They were completely insulated by their perceived success. Then, in the spring of 2026, the trap snapped shut. Omnitech Solutions announced a massive $3 billion merger with Lockheed Martin to develop next-generation AI encryption software for the Department of Defense. It was the biggest tech merger of the decade. Ethan was tapped to become the Chief Technology Officer of the new combined entity. It was a position that would make him a multimillionaire overnight. But there was one tiny catch. Because the project involved highly classified federal defense codes, the newly appointed CTO was required by federal law to undergo an intensive Tier 5 single-scope background investigation for a top-secret/SCI Security Clearance. The application was over 100 pages long. Ethan had to list every asset, every bank account, and every past relationship. When his file entered the Federal Security Database, an automated red flag triggered. A red flag detailing a massive, unexplained $80,000 cash influx into his account 5 years ago, tied to a military power of attorney. The file was automatically routed to the senior vetting specialist for the National Capital Region. Me, June 2026, Room 3C, DCSA Vetting Facility, Arlington. The interrogation room was completely sterile. No windows, just gray concrete walls, a steel table, 2 chairs, and a double-sided mirror. Ethan sat in the center chair. He was wearing his finest charcoal suit, a luxury watch gleaming on his wrist. He was smiling confidently, chatting with his corporate lawyer who sat next to him. He thought this was a mere formality, a rubber stamp meeting before he claimed his $3 billion throne. The door opened. I walked in alone. I wasn't wearing my casual clothes. I was wearing my full-dress green uniform, my major's oak leaves polished to a mirror shine, my chest covered in combat ribbons. I carried a single thick leather binder. I pulled out the steel chair opposite him and sat down. I didn't look at his lawyer. I looked straight at Ethan. The smile on Ethan's face died instantly. The blood drained from his cheeks so violently that his lips turned a faint shade of blue. He gripped the edge of the steel table, his knuckles turning stark white. "Sarah," he choked out, his voice cracking like dry glass. His lawyer frowned, looking between us. "Major Hayes, do you know the applicant?" I slowly opened the leather binder, my movements precise and robotic. "The applicant will refer to me as Major Hayes, and yes, counselor, we have a history. But today, I am his federal investigator." Ethan swallowed hard, a drop of sweat rolling down his temple, staining his pristine silk tie. "Sarah, please, this is about the Omnitech merger. I didn't know you worked here." "I am the only person who works here that matters to you right now, Ethan," I said, my voice dangerously calm, completely devoid of emotion. I pulled out his signed SF-86 security questionnaire. "Let's begin the financial integrity portion of your clearance review," I said, tapping the paper with my tactical pen. "On Section 22, under Financial Anomalies, you declared that the down payment for your penthouse in 2021 came from personal investments. However, federal bank audits show that the $80,000 was wired directly from a military savings account belonging to a deployed officer under a power of attorney." His lawyer immediately jumped in. "Major Hayes, that matter is entirely legal. The power of attorney gave my client full authority over those funds. No criminal charges were ever filed. It is a closed civilian matter." I didn't look at the lawyer. I kept my eyes locked onto Ethan's terrified gaze. "In the civilian world, counselor, it is a closed matter," I replied coldly. "But this is the Department of Defense. We do not look at what is technically legal. We look at character, integrity, and vulnerability to coercion." I leaned forward, the steel table cold against my forearms. "Ethan, a person who steals $80,000 from their own fiancé while she is deployed in a combat zone is a profound security risk. It proves a pattern of financial deceit, greed, and a complete lack of moral compass. If you are willing to betray the person you promised to marry for a piece of real estate, you are highly susceptible to foreign bribery, blackmail, and corporate espionage." "Sarah, that was 5 years ago," Ethan pleaded, his hands shaking as he reached across the table. "I was young. I made a mistake. Please, you can't ruin this merger for me. My entire life is riding on this position. If I don't get this clearance, Omnitech will fire me. The merger will collapse." "You should have thought about that before you left me with $14 in my account," I whispered. Ethan turned to his lawyer, his eyes wild with panic. "Do something. Can we request a different investigator? This is a conflict of interest. She's doing this out of revenge." The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Major Hayes, we will formally request a review of this interview due to personal bias. My client demands an impartial investigator." I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in 5 years. It was a cold, predatory expression that made the lawyer freeze. "You can request whatever you like, counselor," I said smoothly. "But according to DCSA Directive 5220, once a financial fraud red flag involving military personnel is flagged, the senior vetting officer has exclusive jurisdiction. There is no transfer. There is no alternative." I pulled out a second document from my folder, a document they didn't know existed. "And let's look at your current financial situation, Ethan," I continued, flipping the page. "To maintain that luxury penthouse and your wife Lydia's lifestyle, you have taken out 3 high-interest secondary mortgages. Your tech firm is heavily leveraged. You are currently drowning in over $2 million of private debt. You desperately need this merger bonus just to keep from going bankrupt next month. Am I correct?" Ethan looked down at the table, a broken man. He couldn't speak. He just gave a miserable, slow nod. A federal security clearance cannot be granted to an individual with massive, unmanageable debt who has a documented history of financial theft, I announced, my voice booming in the small room. You are in textbook definition of an insider threat. I picked up the heavy, mechanical federal stamp sitting next to my binder. I pressed it into the black ink pad. "Sarah, please!" Ethan cried out, tears finally spilling over his eyelids, ruining his arrogant face. "My mother, she's sick. She needs my financial support. My wife will leave me if we lose the penthouse. I'm begging you, have mercy. Just sign the approval. I'll pay you back the $80,000. I'll pay you double. Just don't destroy my career." I looked at him, and for a fleeting second, I remembered the boy on the bridge who had promised to love me forever. But that boy never existed. The man sitting in front of me was a parasite who fed on the sacrifice of others. Eleanor told me 5 years ago that my $80,000 was a storage fee, I said, my voice dropping to a freezing whisper. Consider this denial the interest on that fee. I slammed the heavy stamp down onto the front page of his security clearance file. The loud thud echoed like a gunshot in the sterile room. Printed in dark, indelible red ink across his name was the word denied, unfit for federal trust. I stood up, buttoned my uniform jacket, and tucked the leather binder under my arm. This interview is concluded. Armed escorts will show you out of the Pentagon. Have a nice day, Mr. Vance. I turned my back on his sobbing, broken form and walked out of the room, the heavy steel door locking behind me with a final, satisfying click. The corporate fallout was swifter than a military strike. 48 hours after the DCSA issued the formal security clearance denial, Lockheed Martin pulled out of the merger, citing unacceptable security risks within Omnitech's executive leadership. The $3 billion deal was dead. The board of directors at Omnitech blamed Ethan entirely. He was fired by the end of the week, his corporate reputation completely ruined in the tech industry. No firm would hire a CTO who was officially labeled unfit for federal trust by the Pentagon. Within 3 months, the bank foreclosed on the luxury penthouse. Lydia, the elegant pageant queen who loved his money, filed for divorce and took his remaining assets. According to a mutual acquaintance, Ethan and his mother Eleanor are now living in a cramped 2-bedroom trailer on the outskirts of Atlanta. He works as a low-level tech support contractor, earning a fraction of his former salary, buried under a mountain of debt he can never repay. Yesterday, I took a day of leave. I drove down to Savannah, Georgia. I walked out onto that same rainy bridge where Ethan had once proposed to me. The water below was gray, churning, and beautiful. I stood there in my civilian clothes, the wind blowing through my hair. For 5 years, I carried the weight of their betrayal. I carried the shame of being fooled, the anger of being robbed, and the cold loneliness of the blackout zone. But as I looked out over the river, I realized that the weight was gone. Revenge isn't about hatred. It isn't about living in the past. It is about balancing the ledger. It is about ensuring that those who use the sacrifices of honorable people are eventually forced to pay the full price of their treachery. If you are listening to this and someone you loved has stolen your savings, ruined your trust, or used your absence to build their own empire, do not despair. Do not waste your breath screaming at them. Let them have their temporary penthouse. Let them wear their temporary diamonds. You just focus on your mission. Build your skills. Climb your mountain. Become so powerful in your truth that one day, their entire destiny will have to pass through your hands. And when that day comes, you won't even need to raise your voice. Your silence will do all the work. I am Major Sarah Hayes, and my account is finally settled.